And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, up first, flying weather for, Sunday morning. IFR northern Bering Sea here, right through the Bering Strait and down to Nunivak Island. And then a couple of zones here extending eastward from the area here over the Chukchi Sea and the northwest coast. One right across the north slope out to Prudhoe Bay, Kaktovik, Barter Island. Another one here right along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. Marginal VFR into the western interior areas with some IFR along and just east of the Alaska Range. More IFR there down over northeast Bristol Bay. And a big area of IFR here along the North Gulf Coast down to southern Kodiak Island, south coast of the Alaska Peninsula. And in close to the coastline of the Panhandle, otherwise out west, just about all of the Aleutians forecast to be VFR. And for the afternoon, that continues. VFR for the Aleutians all the way in now to the Alaska Peninsula with diminishing IFR here along the southwest coast. Northern Bering Sea there, St. Lawrence Island becoming marginal. Same thing for Nunivak Island. A lot of marginal VFR though over the western interior. Still some IFR along the south slopes of the Brooks Range there. But the north slope improving VFR. Marginal VFR central Arctic coast. Kodiak Island, mostly VFR down in this area up into Cook Inlet. And IFR early on tomorrow, you can see burns back to the west there, leaving the southeast coast, virtually VFR. And for, there we go, Monday afternoon, or wait a minute here, went a little fast there. Monday morning, VFR continues for the southeast coast. North Gulf Coast IFR, and that band extending northwest right across the Talkeetnas into the Denali Park area. Some IFR again here over the western Alaska Range. IFR along and just south of the Brooks Range. Otherwise, the north slope pretty good and not too bad out over the Bering Sea. Some IFR here over the central Bering around the Pribilof Islands back to the west, but south of St. Matthew Island. And possible IFR there for Adak to Amchitka Island. And then for the afternoon, next storm starting to push some IFR almost to the western Aleutians, not quite making it. IFR zone here over the eastern Bering Sea, across the Pribilof Islands, trying to get down to the Alaska Peninsula, but marginal VFR will arrive on the north coast. Marginal VFR in the central interior, actually from the western Alaska Range, all the way up into the Arctic coast there. Better conditions either side off to the east and back to the west. Also down to the south, south central Alaska, mostly VFR for Kodiak. Lower conditions right in along the southeast coast with some areas of marginal VFR even over the inside waters. Passes, Anatuvik and Adigan, mostly IFR for the day on Sunday. Lake Clark and Merrill, same forecast, IFR, lowest conditions on the eastern approaches. Rainy IFR, especially on the east entrance here. Windy, marginal VFR becoming IFR into the afternoon. And Isabel holding VFR, although the clouds will be thickening and lowering throughout the day. Mentasta VFR, Tanita VFR possibly becoming marginal during the day. And Portage, marginal VFR to IFR. Chilkoot and White, IFR, or VFR for another day. Freezing levels, very warm air aloft here over the central and eastern part of the state, 12,000 feet or better. That's supporting those high 80s over the eastern interior for tomorrow afternoon for those temperatures near 80 in the Copper River Basin. 14,000 feet over the Panhandle, that's supporting those highs 70s to lower 80s for the day on Sunday. Cooler air back here out over the Bering Sea. And for icing, some considerable moderate icing pushing into the Yukon Delta, extending northward there, right up along the northwest coast into the Chukchi Sea. And another area with the next system pushing into the southwest Bering Sea, Shemya and Attu in those areas. And from there, looking at the jet stream, upper level low here near the Bering Strait. West-northwest winds 75 to 95 knots across the Bering here. Take a turn to the north at 100 to 115 knots right across the west central interior here, actually almost in the central interior, on up into the Arctic, and that going up and over the top of this ridge from the Yukon Northwest Territories right into the northeast Pacific. And so we've got some northeast winds at about 60 knots blowing across the southern panhandle. 9,000 feet, again, main low here out over the Bering Strait. West-northwest 55-knot winds turn southwest up to 70 knots here coming into the central interior. Much lighter under high-pressure ridge over the panhandle. And 3,000 feet, same pattern, low here near the Bering Strait. West-northwest winds 45 knots, diminishing as they approach the Alaska Peninsula. 40-knot winds here in the Gulf of Alaska. And southwest winds, not all that strong here for the east side, pretty light and variable for the panhandle. And from there, looking at turbulence, looks like a widespread area, considerable moderate turbulence, especially for smaller aircraft over the interior from the Brooks Range right on down Kenai Peninsula, Susitna, Manuska Valley, Kodiak Island, well as the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and again, much of the western interior areas, and pretty smooth for the southeast coast.